بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. First and foremost, I want to thank each and every one of you who came to this great event today, and we are hoping at the end of this you will get back something that's beneficial for you and the people you return to. With the Islamic tradition and the Somali culture. So first speaker that we have today, Jennifer Miller, and she is specialized in LICSW, focus on substance use and reduction stigma. Jennifer has a master's degree in clinical social work from the University of Minnesota. She has loved helping individuals and families throughout her 20-plus year career in county government, corrections, community nonprofits, and direct practice. Now, together with her amazing partners at England, they hope to create community and spaces that offer a wide range of behavioral health and human service that supports in a safe, equitable, inclusive, respectful, compassionate way, and to nurture those in our community that have been historically marginalized and underserved. In her free time, Jennifer enjoys spending time with her dog, Buddy, being a proclaimed foodie, traveling with the world, learning about cultures, and also listening to reggae music. Welcome, Jennifer, to the podium.
Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate the generosity, and I have deep gratitude for being able to talk to you today about the brain, mental health, addiction, and also stigma. Although I am not Somali, I am certainly familiar with stigma. I'm certainly familiar with mental health issues and addiction, as it has been my life's work. So I'm hoping today that you all can learn a little bit about the brain, learn a little bit about how it is impacted by both mental health issues and addiction, and maybe a tiny bit about how to think about stigma and what to do to help those that you see suffering with mental health struggles and addiction. I just talked about the objectives, so we're going to learn a little bit about actually how the brain works and how it changes when certain things happen, and why mental health and addiction especially is so hard to address, why it's so difficult to change, why it can take so much time, stigma, and to basically come to the understanding that it's not just behaviors. When we are trying to see, when we're seeing people in our community or those we love who have addiction and mental health issues, it's not because it's a choice. It's not because it's just a set of behaviors. There's something going on inside that needs also to be worked and helped on. The brain sends and receives basically electric and chemical stimulation to help our body work and tell it what to do. Normal brains get these hits of hormones called dopamine, and it's kind of like a happy hormone. So it makes you feel good, and it reminds us, I like doing things that make me feel good. The other part, right up here, the part that doesn't develop until maybe 25, so if you've ever had a teenager, you'll know that their decision making isn't always the best, right? Anybody who's had a teenager knows this. They don't always make the best choices. They don't always have the best judgment. It's because this part of the brain isn't even developed yet. So it's that rational thinking part. When someone is impacted by trauma or addiction, sometimes that part of the brain doesn't work often as well. So much of what we call mental illness is really a case of brain chemicals gone crazy. Most of this comes from stressful and traumatic life events that we cope with. If you've had stress and trauma and you don't address the root cause, things may not get better. These stressors and bad things that happened in the brain can result then in coping through addiction. So we as human beings figure out how to deal with life, whatever life hands it to us, and however we can deal with it given our circumstances. Some of the ways that I call your brain gets hijacked means you can have every intention of doing something and having a life that includes all the good things and employment and marriage and children and everything that's important to you, but things can happen. We can have traumatic events. My brain can also be triggered and changed by anger, depression, anxiety, stress, grief. grief and loss, substance use, and of course, most of us have had a lot of these things happen through the course of our lifetime, right? And if it hasn't happened all to us, it's happened to our parents, it's happened to our grandparents, it's happened to our children, and this all impacts us as families. Gabor Mate, an author of a book called The Realm of Hungry Ghosts, defines addiction as any repeated behavior, substance-related or not, because you can have multiple addictions. You don't just, substance use or alcohol isn't the only kind of addiction. It's when a person feels compelled to persist regardless of the negative impact on their life and the lives of others. This statement implies that it's not a choice, right? It's a repetitive thing, and yet no matter how bad things get, the person continues to do this. Things like anger, depression, substance use, and all the rest are adaptive and coping. So this is how you learn to cope. This is what we do. We figure out how, I don't feel good, this isn't working, I don't feel right, so I'm gonna figure out how to feel better. It's normal, it's what our brain does. We are hardwired for self-preservation, to protect ourselves and survive. So at any moment when things are happening to us or we're going through things, our brain's trying to figure out how to feel better, how to get through it, how to get past it, and how to cope with it. Our brains are always doing exactly what it was supposed to do from the time that we became into existence. So here's my example of like a cave person. Since humans roam the earth, our brains have been hardwired to keep us alive and safe. Number one, no matter what happens, our brains will take over, and then there's the little part inside, and it's gonna keep us safe. It's why we don't touch hot things. It's why we run away from scary things like animals with big teeth. It's also gonna remind us, keep doing things that make us feel good. Hugging your children, eating good food, all that stuff is gonna give us these happy hormones like, yes, I wanna do more of that. And I'm gonna do less of the things that don't make me feel good, because I don't get dopamine from that. Self-preservation gives me dopamine. When I escape, whatever that is, the saber-toothed tiger, I feel better when it's over because I escaped. And procreation. We're supposed to continue to have families and grow. But our environment is different. Different than then. Different than having to protect ourselves from large animals with big teeth chasing us. Different than having to catch our own food to survive. So staying alive, unlike disease, so if you think of cancer or diabetes, some other diseases that people may have, addiction is not a malfunction of biology. It's just kind of like a disease. I personally don't think it's exactly like a disease, but that some people do. But it does reflect the brain's normal process and change. So our brains, unlike having cancer, right? Cancer, either you have it and you get treated and it goes away, or you continue to have it, right? With addiction and treatment and support and help, your brain can actually get better. Your brain, after several months or a year or two, can actually start to fix itself on its own with just the outside interventions and sometimes medication. So unlike other organs, the brain is designed to change. The prefrontal cortex, remember the part that doesn't work well for your teenagers? And now, but by the time they hit 25 or 30, suddenly that same child that didn't have good judgment or reason suddenly makes good decisions and is doing so much better. That's why. But when we're in an addiction, this part of the brain starts to shut down and impulsivity takes over. So you may have someone who's 30 years old, but if they've been struggling with an addiction and or mental health for a long time, this part of their brain isn't working and they're not gonna have good decision making and they're gonna be impulsive, much sometimes like your teenagers. So it's important to know that recovery from addiction also relies on that, right? The brain has to get better, it has to heal from the inside. And then the beauty of that is that it rewires itself, meaning it can work better. It can go back to working in a healthy way that it's supposed to. It doesn't have to continue to struggle like this. This is just a couple different pictures again, so you can see the healthy brain. Look at all the pretty colors. That's that dopamine working, that's all parts of the brain working like they're supposed to. And if you look at it for the addicted brain, No colors. So again, I put this picture back up here of the brain. The part here where it's green, where it says memory, processing, and emotion, that's the cave person part of the brain. That's the part that's wired to protect us, to keep us alive, to do all those things. So when that front part with reasoning starts to diminish and not work, this part will take over, and you can see here by the actual lack of lighting. The dopamine, that happy chemical that your brain creates, it's gonna create and happen to you, happen to anyone, with all those good things like I talked about, eating good food, hugging your children, being successful, graduating, completing something, learning. Anything like that starts to have this dopamine start working. And but same thing with substances. Now when we 1,000 million years ago, we didn't have substances like this. But now there's meth and cocaine and alcohol and fentanyl. And all these things are so much stronger. So how I might feel about chocolate and how chocolate may give me dopamine, now imagine that chocolate is thousands and thousands and thousands of times stronger, and it's a substance. So that's what happens. So when you stop using, so now if I've been using this thing that's thousands and thousands and thousands more potent than chocolate, I'm more prone to experiencing anxiety, depression, irritability, emotional and physical pain, fatigue, and I can't sleep. So I'm not well, right? I'm actually physically getting sick and not feeling well and having mental health symptoms. So the motivation to stop using that substance is even lower, because now I don't feel good. I kind of feel like a lot of crap. So when I'm not feeling good and I can't feel pleasure, and I certainly don't feel pleasure from chocolate or hugging my children or going to school, it becomes more and more difficult to stop. Cravings, environmental triggers, impulsivity, all lead to lack of control. And those normal things that I used to get dopamine from, and I like to go to chocolate, seem dull and underwhelming, and it remains this way. So it's not going to stop tomorrow if I were to stop using substance. And in the long run, that's why you see so many people unhappy. So this is just an example. This quantifies the amount of dopamine. So sex, smoking, conquering Mount Everest means doing a really physical feat, or paying off a debt. Look at those numbers. Now, like I told you before, substances and other addictions, multiply that times 400 or 500 or times 1,000. That's what we're talking about. So this is normal. These are normal things that we experience in life that make us happy, that give us that dopamine, happy hormone. Once we're in that addiction cycle, you can see here that we feel good, that gratification part. Then we have withdrawal. So when we stop using, I feel worse. Remember I talked about how you start to feel bad, you feel pain, you feel anxiety, you can't sleep. So I want to use again. That's a craving. And eventually I just want to feel better. And I have to use more in order to feel even okay, or even not like crap. So the more I have to use in order just to feel better and stop being in pain or feeling sick. So this on the bottom picture is a little dopamine receptor. So these little dopamine receptors come out, again, the happy hormone, but they stop working the more someone uses substances or has an addiction problem. And they pull back in. And like I said before, I'd have to use more and more substances to get them to come out, but eventually they don't come out. They don't want to come out. And they're not going to come out for a very, very long time, even if I stop using substances. So in recovery, so if someone does get treatment and does try to stop, it can take up to 3 months or more for those dopamine receptors to start working normally, when they eat chocolate, when they hug a loving family member, when they pay off a debt. So months and months and months have to go by before you even start to feel a little bit better. And you still may have those other things in life. You might have back pain, you might have depressive symptoms that happen before you use substances. So not everything is perfect. And in the meantime, the recovering person feels horrible, sick. So if you've ever had a loved one or watched someone go through substance use withdrawal or treatment from addiction, they don't feel good. They actually can feel very sick. They can be irritable, they don't sleep well, they can gain weight, nothing fun. And they don't experience joy yet. And they don't probably remember even maybe what that feels like anymore, depending on how long it's been. And I decided to talk a little bit about fentanyl today because I understand that that is an issue that's not only in Minnesota, it's not only in the Somali or East African community, but it's in every community and it's everywhere. And it's increasing nationally and internationally in every drug. Fentanyl can be found across the nation and across the world in every street drug. So whether it's cannabis, with marijuana, THC, all the other drugs can be laced with it. And one of the scary things of many about fentanyl is that it's a powder, and so it's easily transferred onto anything, right? It can be transferred to a toy, a water bottle, other drugs, right? Especially because drugs probably are made and distributed in one place, right? So a drug dealer might have fentanyl in the same place that he has cannabis or marijuana. So it will cross-transfer. Fentanyl in a tiny amount, it's an opiate, and I'll talk about it. It's 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine used for cancer patients. So morphine is one of the common medications that you would get for pain. Oftentimes those of us who've had surgery or after giving birth to a child might be offered this opiate. It's an opiate, it comes from the poppy seed. So 50 to 100 times stronger than the morphine that you might get when you need it for pain from the hospital. In recent months, more people have switched from heroin to fentanyl. So heroin is just another avenue to get an opiate. It's another version of an opiate. Because they can receive the euphoric feeling faster and it's cheaper. Fentanyl is more potent than heroin, which means people who ingest it are more likely to overdose, according to the Center for Disease Control. The other thing that can happen, which is very, very, very scary, is those that don't use opiates, those of us that don't use this substance of any kind, one touch, one small ingestion, it can come through your skin because it's a powder, might kill you. So this is also why people die. Some people who go into treatment and become sober from fentanyl, if they relapse and go back, they're more likely to possibly overdose and die because they're not used to that anymore, right? They've been removed from it. It's not in their bloodstream and they're not used to it. So you can't go back to using the same amount that you used to because it might kill you. But remember, I talked about in the very beginning that addiction is about no matter what the negative impact is, you still want to use it. So people do it often. And those of you that I'm sure, I have no doubt because I work in this field, that at least you know one person or you've heard of one person in your family or in your community that has been touched by this, whether it's a loved one or someone in your own family yourself. So according to the Minnesota Department of Health, and this was as of 2020, there has been 1,286 overdose deaths were reported in Minnesota. Now remember, that was also COVID. So you might say, oh, okay, well, it was COVID, maybe more people were using then. It's a 22% increase from 2020 to 2021. It's still going up. This has not gone down. This has gotten worse since COVID. In a news report by Millennium Health, which is a very big laboratory that does urine analysis, among other things, for those of us that work in the field, there has been a 400% increase in fentanyl use in Minnesota since 2019. So that means it's everywhere. It's not just in your community, it's not just in my community, it's in everywhere. The Twin Cities has seen an increase of more than 100%. And again, this isn't 2023 information, this is 2022. So in Minnesota, 107 opioid deaths occurred in 2020 in the age range of 0 to 24, which means it's hitting young people hard. This substance is more likely to touch someone under the age of 25 in every community. And we're starting to see that in the treatment centers that I work with, which hurts my heart. These are people that, remember when I talked about the brain and the prefrontal cortex? Their prefrontal cortex, if they're under 25, isn't even healthy and built yet. It's not complete. And now we're already damaging it with drugs and slowing its development. So with all of that, and you can talk about fentanyl, and I chose to put fentanyl in this presentation in part because it's so everywhere and because it's hitting young people the hardest, but it does hit everyone. And because it's accessible and less expensive, even people who start maybe with using another substance, whether it's alcohol or cocaine or something else, may end up using fentanyl because, again, it's just a vicious cycle and it becomes cheaper and easier to access. So with all of that, I was asked today to talk to you all about stigma. And stigma is a powerful social process. It involves stereotyping, prejudice, discrimination, and power imbalance. It is rooted in socially oppressing people based on their membership in a group. So in this case, this would be a group of people who have addiction or a group of people who have mental illness. Because the other thing that I hope that you take away today is that mental illness and addiction go together. That's why I can't just talk about addiction today, because mental health and addiction don't separate themselves. Because it's a coping thing, because often, every time, people choose or not choose, people fall into addiction and addiction happens, it is because they're coping from something or about something. And that's usually a mental health challenge, a trauma, many things. So stigma, you can think of it in two ways: public and self. Public stigma is what your community says or thinks about that group, right? So what does your community say about people who struggle with mental health issues? What does your community say about people who struggle with addiction issues? But also, what does it mean for the person, the individual in that community? What do they think of themselves being a person who has an addiction, being a person who struggles with mental health issues? So the history of stigma in response to mental illness is as old as human society. All these factors are likely to have a negative effect on the life of the person. This goes for every stereotype everywhere, right? Every false assumption or belief that every member of the community, any community, is the same is false. None of us. We can belong to a community and have a lot of similarities, but not one of us is the same, whether it's being from my community or your community. The prejudice toward people with mental illness in a community can take extreme forms, and I think we've all seen this or experienced this. They may be denied opportunities, and explanations for their behavior may extend to all areas of life, and in some instances lead to the process of community exclusion. So I want you to think about your own family, your friends, your community, and think about how people are treated or where they are. Are kids who have autism sent to school or not? Are folks who have addictions kept in the house and not allowed to go anywhere often, or tried to be contained? These are stories that I know of from people I know. And it's probably happening and you may not know. So stigma is resistant to change and requires fierce and consistent combat. That means all the time, every day, as often as you can, pay attention to it, understand it, try and grapple and fight with it within yourself and maybe within your community, hopefully. I know I am neither Somali nor practicing Muslim. However, I do understand that the relationship between culture, mental health, addiction is evident in every community, including stigma. Somali and other Muslim cultures are derived from the Muslim religion. You can't separate it. Even those that don't practice Islam today, let's say, still have that culture. You don't remove someone from that culture even if they're not going to the mosque, even if they're not praying every time. Just simply understanding and acknowledging that to create change and help reduce stigma can help. And that's what I'm hoping you leave here with, is that think about culture as part of everything. You can't take it apart. from being Muslim, from practicing. This is generations, right? Generations and generations and generations of this culture. Doesn't matter whether you've been to the mosque today. So acknowledging the immediate and generational damages of trauma inflicted by the numerous barriers of racism, discrimination, skepticism, distrust of Western white system, lack of information, lack of access to resources, no power or access to interpreters. Believe me, although again, I don't experience it personally, it is my job and my role to help alleviate some of those disparities and issues that people face. And so I see them all the time. And ideally what we want is to keep talking about it, keep pointing it out, keep trying to figure out how to address it within the power that you have, within your role, within your family, within your community, within your greater community, because that's what's going to make change. People need to be educated on this stuff. People need to maybe think about it a little differently, and addressing and acknowledging traditions, cultural beliefs, and stigma associated with substance use and mental illness in these communities play in preventing people seeking help and help decrease the feelings of shame, guilt, humiliation surrounding substance use and mental health symptoms. And I'll share a personal story that one of my staff, who's a therapist, had with a 24-year-old young Somali man who came to her for therapy. Number one, he had to come to her for therapy at 8 a.m. because he worked overnight somewhere. So he didn't want to tell his family that he was going to therapy. So he came right after work. So he works all night and then he goes to therapy at 8 in the morning. He lived with his mom and his sister. His sister is, I think, an older sister, a younger sister. I don't recall if there was anyone else in the home, but he was also on medication for depression. So my staff, the therapist, knows that he's not telling his family. She knows he's on medication. His family's going, where do you go every Tuesday morning? Why are you not coming home? And he has to lie and say, he chooses to lie and say, I'm going to breakfast, because he didn't want to deal with his family's discussion around going to therapy, and they still didn't know he was on medication. One day he comes to therapy with my staff and says, my sister found out I was on medication. She's really mad and she told my mom. Now it's a big deal in the house. It's a big deal in the house. He feels horrible. He feels shameful. He's like, why, this made me feel better. I feel better in therapy. I feel better on this medication, but my family's so upset with me. What do I do? And of course, as a good therapist, you can't tell people what to do. You have to help them process for themselves what's best. And so they had lots of conversation around it. But my point is, that young man was suffering, and he still is suffering. And he's not only suffering with his own depression and his own challenges around therapy and medication, but now he's suffering from shame, guilt, and humiliation for either lying to his family, which he doesn't feel good about, or not lying to his family and then having to address the shame that he feels, that stigma that's also personal, right? That I'm not supposed to be doing this, I'm not supposed to be on this, everybody tells me I'm not supposed to, but I don't feel good. And I feel better when I talk to this person and I get help from medication. So what's he supposed to do? Well, luckily, he's, in my opinion, because I'm a therapist, he still comes to therapy. I'm not sure about the medication. I haven't talked to her about him lately, but he does come to therapy. So at least I know he's not getting worse. Because that's the other thing with depression, substance use, whatever. It often can get worse if it's not addressed. So I chose this picture because oftentimes, dealing with addiction, significant mental health issues, feels like you're in a boat with holes in it. Is this ever gonna change? Can we fix it? I'm just gonna keep pouring out the water, but the water keeps coming in. This is exactly how it feels, whether you're in the addiction or struggling with the mental health issues, or if you're watching someone you care about with them. So what can we do? Some options are educate yourself and others to the neurobiological and predictable impact of mental illness and addiction. So go back and think about what I taught you about the brain, or what you know about the brain already. And that prefrontal cortex, simply If you're frustrated with someone who's not stopping an addiction, and now you know that they can't actually make good decisions because this part of their brain that makes good decisions doesn't work. It's not lit up, it's not turned on based on that PET scan, the colorful picture between the healthy brain and the addicted brain. So if I'm addicted to, and I gave this example, if I was in a car accident and I broke both my legs, would you expect me to walk right away? I had to heal, right? I would have to heal. And maybe I still wouldn't walk as good. If I'm addicted to harsh drugs for years and my prefrontal cortex hasn't worked for years, am I expected to think well and make good decisions? I have to heal. And healing from that can take months, years, and often forever. People in recovery, they say when they've struggled with addiction and stop using and feel better, they say that they're in recovery. Recovery lasts forever. You work on it all the time. Even if you relapse and go back, you can be in recovery again. It's like falling off a diet or whatever, you know, you can start it again. So it all is not lost when somebody does relapse, if somebody does access treatment or stops using on their own. But one of the things that I've learned in the recovery field is nobody gets sober or stays in recovery without community, without other people. It doesn't mean, I've never been through substance use treatment a day in my life. So I can't relate to what some people have gone through, but I work in it. But I do know that I can be a member of someone's community to help them. I do know that I know a lot about support and access. I do know that I can be a person that doesn't make them feel guilty or shameful. That's a part of what I can do. So if we acknowledge the impact of culture, religion, and community, and this goes for being in the US, being Somali, being whatever, just acknowledge it, talk about it. Don't act like they're not connected, because they are. It's who you are, it's who I am. You know, everything about how we were raised, grew up, beliefs, values, you can't separate it. So begin to combat stigma and redefine expectations and standards within your own community. So as a group, we get to decide, do we want to make people feel shameful? Do we want them to feel guilty? Do we want them to get better? And how can that look? Practice patience, grace, and understanding to those who are suffering, because nobody chooses to be ill, and everyone wants to belong. Nobody wants to be alone. Nobody wants to feel so guilty and so full of humiliation that they can't be with their community or their family or their friends. That's not any of us. We, Somali people, East African, tribal people. Tribal means a group from generations. I'm part Native American. Tribal, same thing. Tribes are groups of people that learn to function and help each other and support each other and keep each other safe. All of that. So you often can't do recovery alone. You need other people. And I would be more than happy to think about that.
aad baad umahadsantihiin dhimirka iyo daroogadaas isku xiran yihiin runtii waxyaaba badan bay ka hadashay oo in Soomaali lagu fasiro fiicnaan lahayd laakiin waxa ugu muhiimsan macnaha aan isleeyahay qaybta hore ee maskaxda pre-cortex-ka loo yaqaano ilmaha teenager-ka waa qaybta macnaha reasoning-ka ama lagu fikiro qofka uu ku sameeyo go'aanka saxda ah ma develop garayso ilaa 25 ay ka gaaraan marka ilmaha intay da'da ka yar yihiin hada aragta ayagoo si kale u dhaqmay macnaha judgment-gooda weli complete ma aha taas way magacawday carruurta iyo yararka teenagers-kana dhib badan baan arkaa marka taa in la fahmo muhiim waaye qofka hadduu mar daroogadii shabaqi uu ku dhaco waa qof dhaawaca ma ka filaysa marka haddana inuu si sax ah u fikiro ilaa la daaweeyo tusaale wuxuu soo qaadatay qof accident galay lugaha ka go'een ma ka filaysid inuu socdo ama uu hore ka socdo ilaa uu ka bogsoodo sidoo kale weeye marka qofka waxa laga yaabaa inaad leedahay asaakiskiisa u doortay laakiin waa ku dhaceen waa xanuunsan yihiin inay bogsadaan ayay u baahan marka taana in la fahmo aad bay muhiim u tahay runtii waxyaaba badan bay ka hadashay marka waad fahanteen inta badan su'aalooyin badan way bixisay Jen aad bay u mahadsan tahay thank you so much and now we move to our next speaker and after our next speaker then we'll have lunch and refreshments and socialize before we go for the workshop so our next speaker is Jocelyn Makwara she has a master's degree and she will discuss mental health campaign with Hennepin County. Jocelyn is the project manager of Hennepin County's Sea Mental Health Awareness Campaign. She oversees community engagement for behavioral health, a service area for the Human Services Department. Her work was recently awarded a 2023 National Association of Counties Achievement for investing in expanded mental health care access through investment in culturally specific mental health providers. The year-long and multimedia mental health awareness campaign to date has reached 100 million views and a third of the read is individuals under the age of 24. Welcome, Jocelyn.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jocelyn McCorder. I just want to preface I come to this work not with any clinical background in mental health, but a background understanding community engagement, youth development, and communications. And so I'm gonna, forgive me if I sound a little raspy today. I don't have COVID for anybody, but I'm just feeling a little under the weather, but needed to be here and very thankful for the opportunity. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about our campaign. So the board-approved and pandemic recovery funded initiative serves as one of many responses to the quadrupling of anxiety and depression since the onset of COVID-19. It is also a recognition that suicide has become the second leading cause of death among individuals under the age of 24. So we recognize that this year long, it started in January of this past year, campaign is really designed to elevate the importance of mental wellness in our communities. Jennifer Miller did a really good job talking about the importance of we need to start having these conversations. We need to start talking and normalizing that. And this campaign is doing so much effort to do that and be a kickstart catalyst for that within our communities. So if you haven't checked it out, our landing page is cmentalhealth.org. It's a space where we are having a dedicated space for people to see hope, joy, and connection. It contains a number of different local and national resources, some of them in the room today, like COPE in the back as well, Hennepin Health, and a number of other services that are available to you all to reach. We recognize that this campaign also serves, if you can kind of see on like the bottom left or the top left, we talk about like things like everyday self-care, taking care of yourself, maybe sending a message to loved ones, letting them know that you care. We deeply recognize that this topic is complex, right? Culture, language. There's so many pieces of identity that matter to this campaign, that have mattered to me behind the scenes with this campaign. And we truly believe that there's something for everyone to take from this campaign in some type of way. And I'll also mention with the website, we have real residents of Hennepin County sharing their stories, unscripted, about how they're getting through their mental health journeys. And we see that as a very important piece of how we are building connections for people that are seeing maybe themselves or the message that's familiar for them with some of the people that are behind this campaign as well. So I'll share a little bit about Sea Mental Health and what that concept means. It really strives to normalize the importance and the ways that emotional well-being can affect all of us and encourage conversations and connections that can help reduce stigma and isolation. Sea Mental Health was one of 4 ideas that residents of Hennepin County unanimously decided that they wanted to move forward with in talking about this campaign. And so when I say that, I mean that community was brought to the table to help inform how we were gonna do this campaign, what words we were gonna say, and the type of messaging that was gonna be recognized for people to maybe take action, to maybe encourage people to like think about this topic in a different way. And so see mental health, this approach, it's holistic. We're not naming any type of solution that's going to be a one way for everyone, for all. We're saying whatever it is that helps you see mental health within your community, within your everyday life, see it for yourself, see it for others, and see a solution that's going to be effective for you, because someone else's walk through this journey may not look the same for you. And it's not this idea, we're also saying, like, it's not this idea that only certain people struggle with mental health. Mental health is something that all of us face. We all go through stress in life. Some of us maybe just have factors within us that allow us to understand how to cope, how to effectively maybe move through that stress or eliminate the stress if we can, and recognizing that anxiety and depression can be very treatable if taken care of early on in the work. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our strategic placement. We've been everywhere. You heard 100 million, so out of home, like on billboards across the highway, mall, kiosks, grocery stores. We've also been in the digital space pretty strongly too, and so this is just an example of some of the out of home that you may have seen. And we've also reached out within faith and spiritual bulletins to effectively get the message across too. So these are some of our stats by the numbers. We're actually, I just got data like Monday, and it's like at 135 million as far as views so far to date. This campaign continues to impress me, just as the project manager behind the scenes. And I say that recognizing also that some of these numbers I actually don't care about. It's the message I get from the teacher that tells me that one of their students is having a turning point because they saw something, they saw some person on the website who shared their story, and it meant something to them. It connected them to a sense of purpose or a sense of a way forward that they never knew before. So this is some of the examples of our campaign messaging to date. We've been in a number of publishing journals and on radio with a number of culturally specific providers that we want to also elevate in this message that culture and, you know, even just the words mental health, they might not be the same in every community. And so how do we reach this work in an effective way, in a way that there's trusted people within every community that can share a message that can draw people to action. And so that's a lot of been the focus of this campaign in a variety of different ways. We are probably on event 34, 35 since May, connecting with communities like yourselves to share on this work and the importance of being where community is celebrating. You know, we were at Somali independence, we've been at, you know, powwows, Juneteenth, Cinco de Mayo, so a number of different spaces and places where people are already celebrating to help deepen the message, to see mental health and to see it in the ways that work for people. And so I'll just conclude by saying that we see this campaign as an opportunity to highlight the importance of human connection and the positive role it can play in one's mental health journey. The connection with self, between family, friends, peers, and more. A connection rooted in compassion and devoid of judgment and rooted in love and appreciation. I just offer for all of you to, you know, check out the website, maybe share it with a friend, connect in this work in a way that feels meaningful to you. And I heard from the audience in many different ways, like, how can I take action? How can I take action? Well, whether it's this campaign or starting these conversations within your community with people you know and trust, start them, continue them, amplify them, be them. So be the trusted source where people can confide and have these conversations, and be the one who says that today is the day I'm going to ask for help if you need it. Thank you.
Dr. Ismail Amara. Dr. Amara is the Chief for Minority Health and Workforce Diversity at the Office for Disparate Research and Workshop Diversity, ODWD, at the National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH. He is responsible for planning, executing, and assessing the ODWD's research and scientist development activities, as well as supporting the Institute's research in minority health and workforce diversity programs. He also works closely with ODWD's director to advise on policies, goals, and objectives for minority health and workforce diversity research. Dr. Amara, welcome to the podium, and he will speak for a few minutes, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. And we want to start this, and good afternoon. And those are the three communities that I was tasked to talk about, and I'm going to talk for very quick, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, about a topic that I was given, which was a question about how culture affects mental health in three different communities that are here. The East African community, predominantly Somalis, the Latinx community, and the Afghan community. So, and I do speak Somali. Maybe some of you don't think I do, but I do speak Somali. And my Spanish is not that good. I don't speak Dari, but I speak Urdu. I forgot the Urdu, so but maybe later on, if you guys want to talk to me about with Urdu, we could do that. So, and so today I want to shed light on an important topic that affects every one of us, regardless of who we are, and that's mental health. Although it's important, mental health perception and stigma and vary across different cultures, and that's what I was given, like how does mental health perceptions mental health, how does it differ in different cultures? Sorry, I may throw like a Somali word here and there, so my uncles and aunties could understand what I'm talking about. And in the East African community, cultural beliefs run deep. We know that, often emphasizing tradition, healing methods, spirituality, community support systems. But unfortunately, this rich cultural tapestry can only contribute to stigma surrounding mental health. That's the unfortunate part. Many individuals and families keep mental health issues hidden. They're fearing shame and discrimination. Language barriers also can further complicate these in Minnesota. This leads to a lot of underdiagnosis and also an inadequate treatment. So hopefully we will be able to move away from these shames in the East African community and maybe treat ourselves and have good treatments. And it's the same in the Latinx community, which places a strong emphasis on family, community. While this is a source of support, it can also contribute to stigma when mental health issues are seen as family matters. So they're not seen as health issues, but they're seen as family matters. And there's also in the Latinx community, there's a traditional role, and we also have it in the East African community, and the Afghan community also have it, which is the gender roles. You know, men are machos, so you cannot say that you're sick or you'll be weak. Yeah. And women are supposed to be marismos, or they're supposed to be the caring, the ones who really always take care of everyone, and that also leads to an unfair burden on women when it comes to mental health. And in the Afghan community, traditions like honor and family and community have a huge pull on the community. It does in these other two communities, but I think it's a little bit more in the Afghan community. And I think these lead to the same issues, misdiagnosis, and not getting mental health and mental health treatments. So this is really how the three different communities look at mental health. But since I come from an oral tradition, this is the dry part of how I would explain it to you guys. But what I did, I was trying to be my old, from the people I came from. So I wrote a story, a short story, and I promise I'll write it in Somali also and send it to you guys. But I wrote it in English that talks about this, and hopefully this resonates. So I'll read this story. It's not that long. It's only 2 minutes, and hopefully it goes through all of these different things that I just mentioned. And I also want to do this quickly because I know I'm holding you, I'm standing between you and the food, so I don't want people to like get mad at me, so I'll do this very quickly. So once upon a time, in the heart of East African communities, there was a tradition of open dialogue. This tradition thought often reserved for discussions around the fire or during communal gathering was seldom used to talk about mental health. The fear of shame, discrimination often silenced these conversations, but there were those who dared to speak up, those who believed in leveraging the community's strength to support individual dealings with mental health issues. They knew that this rich cultural tapestry could be a source of healing and not just of contributing to stigma. In another part of the world, within a vibrant Latin community, family and community was everything. Yet even within these close-knit communities, mental health issues were often kept private and locked away behind closed doors, but change was on the horizon. Brave individuals began to challenge traditional roles of gender and integrated mental health into education and into religious teaching. They knew that their strong community bond would be a source of support, not just a barrier to seeking help. Far away in the rugged mountains of Afghanistan, a cultural deeply rooted in the tradition and values that they thrived in, decades of war and conflict had left scars on the collective psychic of the Afghan people. Yet seeking help for mental health issues remained stigmatized. A few courageous souls began to emphasize the importance of post-trauma support and advocate for increase of mental health resources. They knew that their strong sense of honor community could be a catalyst for change. So that's my short story of how I think people from these different communities see mental health and how they can actually resolve some of the issues that are run deep in their society using the strength of their societies, which is their community, their family bond, and the ways that they always dealt with problems. That's all I have to say. I would let you go and have the food, and I promised I will speak in Somali at the panel. So all the questions that you guys have, the panel, I'm a neuroscientist by training. I've worked in mental health and addiction for 12 years. And so happy to answer any questions, whether it is science, societal, or any other thing issues. And I thank you.
Somali Rochester Media.